The people around look at their comrades in front of them. They all have expressions of fear. The mutated person grabs his comrade. He questions what his comrade did to him. The officer immediately shoots upon seeing this. He knocks down the mutated comrade, but he doesn't die from it. The story takes place a year before the end of World War II. A small advance team of Allied forces boards an airplane. They silently enter the airspace over occupied France by the German forces. They are prepared to sabotage a radio interference tower set up in German territory. They are preparing for the army's landing. The captain orders everyone to obey Ford's command. He is an explosives expert. They rely on each other to destroy the interference tower. However, when their plane passes over the battlefield, they are spotted by the German forces. The plane suffers severe damage under intense gunfire. The members can only reluctantly parachute out. They navigate through the hail of bullets and find their own fates. They don't know how many will be lucky enough to survive. Mike, who jumps into the water, is one of the lucky ones. Shortly after he entered the nearby jungle, he encountered the demolition expert, Ford. Meanwhile, they were surrounded by many German soldiers who are searching. One of their parachuting comrades was shot dead on the spot, but they could only hide and watch helplessly. Ford told Mike, their main mission was to destroy the interference tower. Nothing else mattered. Before long, the two of them were in the jungle again. They encountered 3 other surviving comrades. They had to make their way to the rendezvous point. They would check for any other survivors once they reached there. Little did they know, before they had gone far, they accidentally stepped on an enemy-laid landmine. One comrade was instantly killed by the explosion. The remaining 4 could only rely on their bayonets. They inserted them into the soil to detect landmines, and cautiously moved forward. After they exited the dangerous minefield, they encountered a girl. She was a French. Fortunately, Mike knew some French. This prevented any misunderstandings between the two parties. Thus, they were not mistaken for German soldiers. This girl, named Chloe, happened to live in the rendezvous point the soldiers intended to reach. So under the girl's guidance, they arrived at the village occupied by the German forces. They temporarily took shelter in Chloe's house. She had an aunt and a younger brother. The aunt had fallen ill recently. She remained in her room. They could stay safely in the attic. They discussed how to destroy the interference tower. The tower was located near the church. It was also a German military base. There were a significant number of stationed soldiers. They needed careful planning to succeed. While everyone was discussing, they suddenly heard noises downstairs. They looked through the window. They saw German soldiers forcibly taking away villagers. They learned from Chloe. The Germans did this from time to time. The aunt had been taken away before. She fell ill only after being returned. Almost every night, the village had patrols searching every house. After understanding the situation, they had differing opinions. They believed that destroying the interference tower was no different from suicide, but the main Allied forces were launching a full-scale attack at daybreak. If they didn't destroy the radio tower in time, the Air Force wouldn't be able to support the army on the beach. They provide air support. Ford saw them arguing more and more intensely. He immediately ordered Jason and Chris to the rendezvous point to see if there were any other survivors. Ford instructed Mike to stand guard downstairs to ensure safety, but when he reached the 2nd floor, he suddenly heard strange sounds coming from the room at the end of the corridor. Curiously, Ford walked over. He looked inside through the crack of the door. He discovered that Chloe's aunt was living there, but Ford couldn't find anyone after searching around. As he was puzzled, a woman with a face covered in bumps appeared. He was startled and quickly stepped back. The aunt didn't know what illness had caused her to look like that. At that moment, a patrol team arrived at Chloe's house. Mike hurriedly ran back to the attic to hide. However, these German soldiers didn't come to arrest or search. The leading captain had always liked Chloe. He had previously insulted Chloe forcefully. He would come here to relax whenever he was on night duty. But the instinct of a soldier, he quickly sensed that Chloe was nervous. He immediately called the soldiers outside to come in, instructing them to search the house thoroughly. As the soldiers were about to reach the attic, they saw a boy standing on top. It was Chloe's younger brother, Paul. Paul intentionally threw the baseball down. Then he held the glove and asked the soldiers to play with him. Paul's action immediately dispelled the soldiers' suspicions. Mike and Ford in the attic narrowly escaped a disaster. The captain sent his men out again. He planned to stay behind and spend the night with Chloe. For the safety of those two, she could only reluctantly comply, but kind-hearted Mike couldn't bear it. He took a risk and pointed his gun at the captain. Mike successfully captured him. Then he accepted Ford's assignment. He went to find those two companions. Their time was becoming increasingly urgent. When Mike arrived near the rendezvous point, he didn't see his companions, but he unexpectedly discovered a truck coming out of the German military base, with many sick villagers lying on top, followed by doctors wearing white coats. This naturally made him curious. Immediately after, he saw soldiers wielding flamethrowers. They were spraying and burning the villagers. It seemed like they had to do this to completely destroy. Before long, Mike's trail was discovered by patrol dogs nearby. Mike, with no other choice, jumped onto the German truck to avoid them. He discovered that there were also many corpses piled inside. In this way, Mike hitched a ride on the truck and entered the base. Then, taking advantage of the driver's distraction, he jumped down again. He sneaked into the nearby house. Afterward, he noticed the layout here. It resembled a prison for holding prisoners. But at the same time, there were many doctors. For a moment, he couldn't figure out the purpose of this building. He followed the low growling sound he heard. He walked up to a wall with several round holes. Curiously, Mike looked inside through the round holes. A terrifying face suddenly appeared. He was scared and quickly backed away. Then Mike entered another strange laboratory. The laboratory was suspended in mid-air. It had many bags containing human bodies hanging. The people in the laboratory had undergone unknown experiences. Their appearances had become extremely horrifying and disgusting. At that moment, footsteps could be heard outside. Mike quickly hid in a small room inside. He saw doctors pushing glass jars filled with red liquid. At the same time, he noticed in the room he was hiding, there were also many containers of red liquid. Some of the red liquid was in 4 bags, while others was in syringes. Although he didn't know what it was for, his intuition told him it was not simple. So Mike secretly took one syringe. After the doctor left, Mike returned to the laboratory. He suddenly heard a woman's voice. He followed the sound and opened a curtain. To his astonishment, Mike saw a woman's head. This head was only connected to the spine below and still alive. This scene completely shattered Mike's worldview. He dared not stay any longer and hurriedly continued to explore. Before long, he found himself in another small laboratory. He saw his fellow soldier Rig, who was on the same plane. Rig was tied to a bed. A black tube was attached tightly to his stomach. Just as Mike was about to rescue him, someone arrived outside the laboratory. He had no choice but to hide and carefully observe. The newcomers were conducting experiments on another body. That person injected the red liquid with a syringe. Then the soldiers took the experimented person and pushed into the place that looked like a morgue. After everyone left, he cautiously pulled out the tube inserted into his companion's body. Then Mike took him. They both crawled into the laboratory sewer system. They successfully escaped the base through it. After they both returned to Chloe's house, he discovered that the 2 companions who went to the rendezvous point had also returned. Mike shared everything he had seen and experienced in the base. He told Ford everything. Ford was also frightened. He took the evidence Mike had brought. He interrogated the German captain. The captain claimed to be a regular officer and was unaware of what the doctors were doing. Ford clearly didn't believe his lies. The base was constantly patrolled. They captured villagers for experimentation. They couldn't possibly be unaware of the issue. But no matter how Ford pressured him, he didn't reveal the secrets of the base. At that moment, no one had a better solution. But it was almost dawn. There was only 1 hour left until the main force landed. They had to find a way to destroy the interference tower. While Ford and the others discussed their strategy, Jason once again went to the attic. He discovered the German captain lying motionless on the ground. Jason thought something had happened to him. He hurriedly approached to check. However, he accidentally got kicked down by the captain, who pretended to be unconscious. Then the captain pounced on Jason and took away his handgun. Before Jason could call for help, he was shot by the captain. The others quickly rushed over upon hearing the gunshot. They managed to subdue the German captain again. But Jason, severely injured, was in critical condition. Several bullets had hit his chest. Jason gasped for breath and collapsed in front of everyone. Suddenly, Mike had an idea. The human head in the laboratory, the same red liquid injected into Jason's body. Mike didn't know what would happen. He just wanted to give it a try. A long time passed. Jason showed no reaction. As the others were preparing to leave to destroy the interference tower, Jason suddenly sat up from the ground. Everyone present was stunned. The German captain said to Ford, "Now you know what it does, right?" The awakened Jason was like a normal person, but he couldn't feel any pain in his wounds. At the same time, his strength became immense. Jason crushed a stainless steel kettle while speaking. Gradually, the others noticed that his blood vessels were rapidly bulging. The blood inside him was visibly flowing. Due to a headache, he forcefully tilted his head back and snapped his spine. Then he instantly restored his head. Mike cautiously approached to examine. Jason suddenly grabbed Mike's neck and said, "What have you done to me?" When the others tried to intervene, they were also thrown aside by Jason. His fighting ability became exceptionally strong. Ford didn't dare to hesitate anymore. He picked up a machine gun and sprayed bullets at Jason. When they saw Jason lying motionless on the ground, they finally felt relieved. Ford questioned the German captain about what was going on. The captain said the German Empire wanted to last for 1,000 years. They needed soldiers who were immortal. As soon as the German captain finished speaking, Jason got up again. But this time, before Ford could shoot, Mike, who was behind him, used the butt of his gun to knock Jason down, repeatedly striking Jason's head. He didn't stop until his head was caved in. The patrol team outside heard the gunshots and rushed over in their car. Meanwhile, the German captain took advantage of the distraction and took the boy Paul with him. Ford hurriedly chased after them and shot at the German soldiers. He tried to rescue the boy. Both sides immediately engaged in a fierce gunfight. When the captain jumped onto the jeep to leave, Ford took advantage of the opportunity and shot his gun and hit the captain's cheek, but the driver still drove away with him and the boy. Their time was becoming increasingly urgent. Ford asked everyone to prepare quickly. They were going to the base to blow up the interference tower, but Mike believed it was their fault that the boy was taken away. They couldn't just leave this matter be. The two of them even had a fierce argument about it. Eventually, Mike convinced the others. After all, they were going into the base anyway. They could rescue the boy at the same time. They blew up the base and the interference tower. The injured captain didn't die. After returning to the base laboratory, he disregarded the doctors and others' obstruction. The captain injected several experimental drugs consecutively, even though some of the drugs had not been tested on living subjects. He understood if he didn't do this, he might die. Ford and others have a discussion. They decided to split into two groups. Two of them stayed outside. They tried to attract more German soldiers. They tried to delay the German soldiers. The other three infiltrated the base through the sewer. They tried to find the boy and blow up the interference tower. Unexpectedly, they encountered a disagreement as soon as they entered. Mike and Ford planned to blow up the interference tower first, and then search for the boy. However, Chloe, being the sister, opposed it immediately. In the end, she separated from the two and went to find her brother alone. Mike and Ford proceeded relatively smoothly. They quickly found the control room of the interference tower. After Ford killed the soldiers inside, he instructed Mike to set up explosives in the laboratory. In about 20 minutes, the main force would land. They synchronized the timer with the interference tower, so the bomb would explode after 18 minutes. Chloe was taken by German soldiers to the detention area. She believed her brother was imprisoned here. She didn't know the other side was deliberately deceiving her. Fortunately, Mike arrived in time to rescue Chloe. Then the two of them successfully found Paul. Mike told Chloe to take her brother and leave first. After all, he hadn't set up explosives here yet. Unexpectedly, as Chloe and her brother entered the sewer, an arm reached out. The arm pulled Chloe back. This arm belonged to the zombie specimen in the base. Although it used to be an ordinary villager, it had completely lost its sanity. The zombie pounced on Chloe, trying to strangle her. Chloe pulled out a handgun from her body. She aimed at the zombie's head and fired repeatedly. The zombie twitched uncontrollably after falling to the ground. Just when Chloe thought it was safe, the zombie struggled and sat up. She had no choice but to continue running away. Chloe arrived outside the laboratory. She found a flamethrower. When the zombie also chased after her, she aimed directly at it and burned the zombie. Chloe incinerated the zombie completely. Then she turned around and left the base. Ford had just finished installing explosives in the interference tower control room. The German captain turned into a zombie appeared. Since he had been injected with drugs while still conscious, he hadn't lost his consciousness, but his combat strength had increased more than twofold. The German captain easily knocked Ford down with 2 strikes. The other 2 soldiers led the German captain towards the village. While both sides were engaged in fierce gunfire, Paul ran over. Chris hurriedly ran over and picked up the boy, returning to the defensive position. But at the moment they reached their destination, he was shot in the back by an enemy. At a critical moment, Chloe arrived with a machine gun. She successfully suppressed the German firepower. After the captain subdued Ford, the captain honestly revealed the purpose of the experiments here to him. For centuries, in the asphalt of this region in France, it has harbored immense energy. They only need to refine it through human body, and the German army can continuously create immortal soldiers. At this moment, Mike suddenly appeared. He shot the captain several times in succession, but the captain was completely unfazed. The German captain even charged towards Mike. The advantage of the zombies was fully evident at this moment. As long as the zombies' heads were not smashed, or their entire bodies were not burned, they couldn't die. The captain easily knocked Mike down. Seeing this, Ford, hanging in midair, pulled out the iron hook embedded in his body. He found a red potion that could alter his physiology. Just as Mike was about to suffocate, Ford, who had injected himself with the potion, arrived. He inserted the iron pipe into the captain's body and saved Mike. Then the 2 zombies started fighting. However, because the captain had previously injected a newly developed potion, his physique and strength far surpassed Ford. The captain quickly knocked down Ford again. Meanwhile, Mike held a handgun on the side, continuously looking for an opportunity. After Ford noticed this, he pushed a gas cylinder towards the captain's feet. Mike immediately opened fire upon seeing this. Immediately after, the laboratory experienced a violent explosion. The captain, who was in the center, was no longer there. Ford pushed Mike out of the laboratory. He urged Mike to leave quickly, and instructed Mike to go to, they hadn't set up yet, the interference tower bomb timer. Moreover, he had already injected the potion. He couldn't leave here. At this moment, the captain's roar came through. The recent explosion hadn't killed him. Ford dared not hesitate any longer. He ignited the explosives nearby. The laboratory was ultimately completely destroyed. Mike, who managed to escape, returned to the control room of the interference tower. He reset the timer here, and safely left before the entire base was destroyed. The main forces successfully landed in France. They were one step closer to Germany's surrender. When Mike faced questioning from his superiors, he didn't mention the human experiment in Germany. He understood that every country desired immortal soldiers, but that kind of thing shouldn't exist. The movie ends here. Humans long for immortality. Yet, can human immortality truly be achieved? Perhaps we can achieve immortality in the future. But is human immortality truly right? If you like my channel, please subscribe to my channel.